So my latest project is actually a collection of artworks, illustrations that will be going into a book. At present, I've called it Beautiful Trans Bodies, but I'm not sure if that's going to be the title. But at the moment, that kind of encapsulates what the project's about. And it is about celebrating a diverse range of trans bodies through the community. And yeah, hopefully making that into a wonderful book.
And what is it that you kind of, you're hoping to achieve by putting that out there?
Well, one, it's never been done before. A lot of my artworks myself, I always use myself as a study matter. Being trans, it was really easy for me to kind of explore and communicate kind of my own transition through my artworks. And then I had a few friends that asked me to draw them who were transitioning. And it was really, really personal. And I'd never actually studied somebody else's body, let alone somebody, I guess, quite vulnerable who was transitioning. And the response from them was quite overwhelming. And it gave them this real sense of, appreciation of their own body, and especially when somebody's struggling with body dysphoria and gender dysphoria, it made me feel really good that I could maybe offer that back. And I also just, realised in the art world itself, predominantly, it is white male artists drawing beautiful, attractive women, because that seems to be what sells. So I also really like this narrative of taking up space as a trans person and celebrating these bodies that haven't been shown, that are everywhere in society, yeah.
And what's the response been so far then?
Do you know, it's been wonderful, not just from the trans community, but from everybody. I think that everybody feels like it's a really positive project, especially in like the recent climate with, a lot of things going on. I've just had full support, and I think it's a nice crossover. Being a street artist, I predominantly work in that field with a lot of, cis men who are behind the project. So it's that wonderful crossover between the art world and the LGBTQ world kind of uniting together. And I really, that's, a big thing that I'd like out of the project.
And is there something that you can communicate with art and with that image in the creative process that perhaps you can't do when just having a conversation with somebody, do you think?
Yeah, I think, it's easy to have a conversation, but I think artwork starts the conversation for me. I really love people and I love interacting. For me, I also use the artwork, whether it's on paper or whether it's on a giant wall, it's an educational tool. It first and foremost makes my beautiful trans community feel validated and feel seen because we're taking up space. But also every time I paint a wall, I'm forced to interact with the public. So I have to talk about the history of being queer and being trans, and that in itself just works as a brilliant tool for me, I found.
Yeah, and personally, you've documented your own transitioning process over the last few years, and used your art to express that. But how helpful to you personally, and I guess to those around you as well, has it been to be able to say to put your artwork out there, which is incredibly powerful as well, I have to say, and
Thank you.
and to say, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm going through?
I think at first it really kind of came about by accident, because I had top surgery. So I had a double mastectomy and I was bedbound and I was in a lot of pain, and I was doing these really personal sketches just for myself. I felt really uncomfortable. I'd lived in a body that was not mine essentially for so many years, and using art as almost my therapy tool was my way of kind of exploring that for myself. And I felt like I had to share it. There was something about, that for me, there's power in vulnerability, right? And I think sharing it made me, well, I guess almost reach out to see if other people kind of felt the same, and kind of it created that dialogue, So for me, it empowered me then to keep sharing and keep being vulnerable, and not only connect again with my trans community, but that vulnerability allowed other people to, you know, help support me, help maybe empathize with others as well. And I think that that's worked.
When it comes to, you know, creating a work, you know, when you've been documenting through this whole process, is it something that just kind of, you know, flows when the pen hits the paper, so to speak, or when the paint hits the wall, or is it something that you kind of plan out a bit? You've got an idea. Talk me through the kind of process.
So I never really have a process in mind. I guess my thought process is, I guess, one of quite a cliched, tortured artist. I've always got, you know, a lot of my work stems from being in physical pain, or, you know, I talk a lot about mental health, or when I'm having a really tough time. So art, again, is always been a therapy tool for myself. But when I put it out there in the world, it also then it manifests into whatever it becomes as a tool for somebody else. Or, you know, sometimes it's just things that I'm really inspired by, a lot politically, being an activist as well. You know, I get quite fired up by a lot of political events, and I kind of feel like it's, you know, if you've got a platform, if you've got a wall, if you've got a space to use, you have to take that up and say something. And so, yeah, I guess that's my process behind a lot of my thinking.
And what about with, you know, lockdown? No conversation is complete in 2020 without talking about
Of course.
lockdown. Has it helped or hindered your process? I mean, clearly it's affected, you know, I played a gallery in your studio as well.
Sure.
But, you know.
It's actually been, for me personally, a blessing in disguise. 2 weeks before lockdown happened, I had major spinal surgery. That actually was quite complicated, and it went wrong. But it forced me, so I've been bedbound for 2 months for most of it. But that has given me huge reflection time. Why my back had gone, because I'd been working so hard and running around in Play Dead for 5 years. You know, I hadn't stopped. I'd been working on my own art projects. And I think it was a real time for me to go, right, slow down, stop a minute. My body's telling me to physically stop and let my mind catch up with what it is that I want to do. And that's where this book idea came from, really, and thinking about what it is I'm passionate about and what it is I really, really care about. And yeah, that seems to be my activism and my art combined together with my community.
And have you got any plans for the, you know, for the gallery as well, when that reopens, whenever that's going to happen?
Yeah, well, we're hoping July, but obviously we can't have big crowds, so we're not sure how the gallery space itself is going to look. We will still always show artwork, but I think we're just going to have to play it as it comes, and just roll with it, and be adaptable, which is something that we've always done, you know.
And what about, you know, just specifically talking about street art and that kind of medium or genre, if you like, what is it, do you think, about, you know, street art per se, that can make a certain kind of connection that perhaps a contemporary gallery, you know, can't do?
I think street art allows and forces people to look at something, whether they want to or not, which is what I absolutely love. I actually come from a fine art background, which is then really interesting. And I fell into street art because being working class, I realized how inaccessible galleries are unless you're wealthy. And that really bothered me, because I totally believe that art should be accessible and for everybody. And that's when I found other artists, and you know, I realized that it wasn't just old school graffiti anymore. There were real fine artists painting on giant walls with brushes, you know, and I was like, I love this. I love how people are then forced to engage in it and talk about this. And, you know, it makes people feel great, you know, seeing it on, you know, on a wall where maybe you wouldn't even think about it. And sometimes that's subconscious as well, you know. And I think that's really powerful, and something that maybe a gallery can't offer.
And what about the visiting Play Dead is very much on the list, and visiting Portsmouth. It sounds like a really great kind of a really great scene there. How would you kind of describe the scene down there?
Yeah, I mean, I moved back to Portsmouth about 8 years ago now, and I found like a really great group of, you know, now friends, people like my dog Size, and they were all painting on the street, and I realised that there weren't a lot of spaces for these incredible artworks to be shown. And you know, being born and bred in Portsmouth, I basically wanted to create a space that I needed when I was a kid. I wanted a safe space. I wanted a place where my friends can show their work and sell their work, but also be really community kind of inclusive. And, you know, that's kind of the birth of the idea. And those ideas are constantly changing and evolving, but that's always about what the community needs and what Portsmouth needs. It's kind of been taken out of my hands, if that makes sense. It's now it's part of everybody, which I love.
It's great to have that kind of accept, because there still can be sometimes when you say street arts, perhaps a certain demographic might think, oh, well, it's someone spray painting a scroll on the wall, and it's, you know, that's graffiti, and it's a, you know, so it sounds like, has there been any challenges along the way, or has it kind of been quite, you know, accepted pretty early on?
Yeah, and I mean, there has been a few challenges, but that's all right. I quite like a challenge. Do you know what I mean? There's always going to be what I call street art graffiti wars. That's, you know, that's the birth of graffiti and how it is. And I think that's really interesting. It's also interesting having a gallery space and how people see that. But I like those challenges. That's all about us just learning.
Definitely. And just in terms of, just to go back to your own art as well, is there a piece of your art that you've created that you would say it defines you either as an artist or an individual, or both even?
I think probably to date, the most important thing I would say that I've done is this. Yeah, this time last year, I was in New York City, and I was hired by World Pride to go and paint in New York. And, you know, that's quite an achievement to be asked by World Pride as a trans artist to paint, you know, in Manhattan. And it was then that I kind of really defined what I wanted to do and how important the message of, you know, being trans and being inclusive and, you know, being loved, that I could really get my message out there and what I wanted to say, and how that, you know, how big I can take it, I guess. Yeah, so I had quite a long wall, and I painted several characters that kind of depicted different people within my trans community. And obviously, you know, different features of those characters are things like having scars. And again, I talked a lot about mental health. One of the things that I like to write on a lot of my walls is "You are loved." And that came from writing notes to myself, just telling myself that I was loved and those validations, but actually writing it out on the walls really ended up connecting with a lot of people that were seeing the work and made people feel better. And that was, you know, that was so heartwarming. So I wrote that all across the wall. I wrote "You are loved," and I wrote "You are valid." And then that interaction with people on the streets of New York was just beautiful. So yeah.
Must have been so kind of energizing to feel that in that setting as well.
Yeah, because I was, you know, I was aware that I was trans, and I was aware that I was going to America. And that made me, you know, when you're painting a wall, for me as a trans person, I always worry about coming out, because I don't know my setting. You know, I can talk about my story outside Play Dead. I have to look at the audience that's around me. And I guess, yeah, in America being the way it is right now, I was worried about being an open, visible trans person, and what that might look like. But actually, everyone was just incredible. And I would get groups of queer and trans kids coming to find me because they'd never met a visible trans artist. And that in itself just kind of really empowered me to go, yeah, I need to keep on doing this.
Such a powerful thing. And actually, not only to empower yourself, but then to empower others as well. That's quite something, really.
Yeah, and especially young people, I think, you know, they're watching what's going on in the world right now politically and within the climate. And, you know, the media itself towards, you know, LGBTQ people can be quite negative. And I think a lot of my drive is to override that with positivity, because there is positivity out there. I want to show the younger generation that you can have a business, that you can take up space on walls, that you can travel to America. It's going to be hard, but you can do all those things, you know, and for me, that's a real incentive behind what I do.
And just finally, this is the real unfair question that I ask everybody, which
Go
is,
on.
no, are there any artists out there at the minute, whether in the LGBTQ space or elsewhere, just generally, who you're really into at the minute, or you think people should keep an eye out for?
So I met a group of incredible artists when I was out in New York, that I didn't even realize existed. There were some incredible queer artists, which obviously for me personally are really important. There's an LA-based artist called Homo Riot, which is just a great name in itself, who does incredible work, and has become an incredible friend, and I absolutely love the work that he does. And then another artist that I absolutely adore is a young girl called Jilly Ballistic from New York, and she writes incredible, powerful messages in New York subways, which obviously is quite dangerous and she could get in a lot of trouble for, but I really love that rebellious side of street art. You know, I think there's a lot of street art today that's commissioned and paid for, but actually when you see a contemporary artist writing up political stuff that they could, you know, potentially get done for, there's something really kind of fun and naughty and ballsy about that, and it's all very anti-Trump as well, so that makes my heart sing a little bit.
Fair enough. Well, no, thank you so much for that, and I'll put some links to their work in the article as well when I put it online. But really grateful to you for sparing the time to talk. It's been a great conversation.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.